standing room only, but we'd be happy to have you come and fill in the front if you wouldn't mind. Great. So, hello everyone, and welcome to the Metropolitan Planning Council. My name is Danielle Gallet, and I'm a manager here at MPC. We are absolutely delighted to have you here. As you can see, we have a full house, and we have a full agenda, so we're going to go ahead and get started. First, MPC would like to thank our co-sponsors for this event, Christopher B. Burke Engineering and Robinson Engineering. Both Chris Burke and Chris King are here in the audience with us today. They are valued MPC board members as well, and we are grateful for their continued support and generosity. Thanks, guys. We have a great group of speakers with us who have traveled to be here with us today. Am I doing something? Okay. George Hawkins is the general manager of DC Water, and Jordan Dorfman from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency joined us from Washington, D.C. And then we also have the pleasure of Director Lisa Bonnet joining us from the Illinois Protection Agency. Thank you both, all of you, for joining us here today. I'd like to ask anyone in the room that works for a water service utility or works for a municipality that provides water service to please raise your hand. Raise them high, be proud. Awesome. Yeah, that's you, George. So, folks, if you could don't put them down. Great. Folks, if you could take a look around the room and join me in a round of applause for these individuals. You are the folks on the front line making sure that we have safe drinking water and wastewater removal services every day. You keep us safe, you keep us healthy. The service you manage and the infrastructure that you oversee is absolutely incredible. And without it, the foundation of our very communities would not be as functional or thrive. So thank you. Here in the US, to deliver drinking water alone, we have over 1 million miles of pipe beneath our feet. 1 million miles. That's enough pipe to go around planet Earth 40 times. Much of this infrastructure and the massive investment that our grandparents, our great-grandparents, some of us, our great-great-grandparents put in is coming to the end of its useful life. And the bill has come due on our watch. National infrastructure figures such as $1 trillion for drinking water or $300 billion for wastewater are staggering. Here in Illinois, it's estimated that it'll take about $32 billion of reinvestment funds to get our water service infrastructure up to par over the next 20 years. To provide some context, in 2014, the Illinois Protection Agency loaned $501 million for water infrastructure service here in the United States, here in Illinois. Now that's a great start, but we have a long way to go to make sure our infrastructure is up to par here. At the same time, we're experiencing increasing stormwater infrastructure issues, which are causing significant water quality and urban flooding problems. Innovating and upgrading our wet weather infrastructure is absolutely necessary and critical today. It's also costly, which is why we're all here today, right? To discuss what are the financing options available to tackle these water infrastructure issues. Ensuring financing options are viable and equitable for all communities is important to MPC, which is why over the past year, in partnership with the Illinois Protection Agency and Environmental Protection Agency and the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, we have been working to explore ways to streamline the application process for the State Revolving Loan Fund, which provides low-interest loans for water supply, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure. This roundtable coincides with the release of our recommendations report, which features tangible ways to improve the utilization of this important funding source. One of the handouts you should have all received today, and if you don't, there'll be some on the way out, features general highlights of this report, such as improved streamlining of the loan application process, and standardizing agency review timeframes. While many of these recommendations, such as creating a flowchart to outline the loan process, may seem a bit mundane, it's often the simple details that impact the usefulness of a program. So, having a background in dance, I often think in those terms, and capital improvement projects are no exception. There is a choreography that needs to happen for an infrastructure project to come to fruition. From planning to permitting, financing to contracting, all these necessary aspects have to work together in order for the performance to be successful. Delayed or uncertain water financing mechanisms increase costs for communities. In addition to water infrastructure financing at the state level, new funding streams and resources are being worked at the national level as well, and we're going to hear about some of those today. And at the local utility level, to ensure safe and sustainable water services, community leaders must explore new pathways for revenue generation and engage in public discussions about local water rates. And we will hear from one such utility who's doing just that today. It is important for us to recognize that no one funding option will solve all of our water infrastructure reinvestment needs. Our features will share with us what they are working on to tackle this issue, which will set the stage for a dialogue that we'll be having as well. This event is designed to be interactive. We will pause for a question or two in between each speaker, which will then open up at the very end for more general broad questions. At this time, I am very pleased to introduce our first speaker, George Hawkins, who is the General Manager of DC Water. His bio and all of the speaker bios are in the program that you received on your chair today. Mr. Hawkins is going to share with us some of the approaches his utility has been taking to finance water service infrastructure. George, welcome.
Good afternoon. And your water is really delicious, so I'm impressed. I was invited to speak at a program, and they had bottled water up on the table, and I refused to sit up there. And they asked me why. I said, that would be like inviting someone from Nike to come speak and giving them Adidas. This is our product, and if you're not proud of it and you're not willing to serve it at your event, I'm not sure I'm willing to speak. They did change their mind. It was IBM. There was 13,000 people in the room. And the crowd cheered when the notion was you drinking tap water instead of more bottled water. This is an email I got at 11 o'clock this morning from Jack Evans, who's a council member in D.C. and chair of the Finance and Budget Committee. George, I understand that DC Water discovered a water main leak under 31st Street at the 1300 block, right in the middle of Georgetown. Nothing has been done to stop the leak, and residents can hear whooshing water in their basements. They are clearly concerned about sinkholes damaging their homes and in the road. Can you please make fixing this link a priority and keep me posted? Otherwise, this morning we had our own Environmental Quality Committee of the board. We were debating a possible change to the regulation of a TMDL that could cost DC Water ratepayers $1 billion. Anyone in my job is facing these kinds of issues every day, and I'm sure those of you in the industry know of which I speak. The scale of it is hard to imagine, and I won't talk much about it here. DC Water as an enterprise is water, drinking water. We don't call it wastewater, we call it enriched water. For a reason, go online. We just announced last week the largest waste energy facility of its kind in the world, $470 million investment to generate power from poo. And we're very excited about that. That's why it's enriched water to us. But the challenges are incredible, usually with a customer base that is not used to paying the kind of cost necessary to solve them, and may in many respects have no idea who you are as a water company. Yet there is an enormous array of innovations that can be deployed to overcome the challenge. So I won't talk much about the challenge, and I won't even talk about the first and perhaps most fundamental aspect of resolving this problem, which is how you communicate with customers, because this is really about infrastructure finance. But I can tell you, we spend a lot of time at DC Water. You see the logo on my shirt. I've been wearing a uniform for a long time at DC Water, and originally when someone walked up to me in the street and asked me for a job, I said, sure. Look on our site. He said, I've always wanted to work for the Department of Corrections. You couldn't tell from our old logo what the hell we did. And most people had no idea who we were. And if we're not going to be able to ask our ratepayers or anyone else to invest in us if they don't know why, what we do, and why it matters to them. And that means communicating with them everywhere, all the time, in every way we can think of. I won't spend much more time on it. At George Hawkins DC is my Twitter account. At DC Water is DC Water's Twitter account, ranked the best government Twitter account in Washington, DC. We communicate everywhere in any way we can think of with our customers. All of our big underground boring machines have their own Twitter accounts. They argue among themselves about which boring machine is better. They're very funny, but very serious. These are hundreds of millions of dollars in investments. If your customer does not know you, it does not matter what else you do. They will not invest in you. That's true of anything. So talking to your customer more is a vital part of the solution. Second, there is innovation that's possible in every respect. On rates, when I arrived at DC Water a little over 6 years ago, all-in bill. We are not subsidized otherwise. So DC Water ratepayer gets a bill that has water, drinking water, and stormwater on one bill. It was $42 a month. The rate structure that we put into effect on October 1st, just a few weeks ago, is $98 a month. So in my 6 years, we have more than doubled the water and sewer rates on our customer base. In parallel to that, and that's under the core need, if we have a $4 billion capital program, our operating budget every year is $575 million, and DC is a small city compared to a place like Chicago. We have 140,000 residential customers in the city, highest per capita sewer costs in the United States. We do have a big suburban wholesale customer base, which helps. We have a very large per capita cost to confront. On rates, what are possible? Almost anything is possible. What we have done is a number of things. For example, our biggest single project and the largest public works project going on in Washington, D.C. today is our solution to combined sewer overflows, similar to the scale of the project they're doing here in Chicago. That part of our program, a $2.6 billion price tag, is isolated and identified on our bill on a particular charge, which is not based on volumetric water use. It's based on impervious area on your lot, which is correlated to how much stormwater is generated from that lot into the system that we have to handle with the big underground pipes that we're building. So everyone has an impervious area charge. It is exclusively devoted to that project, so we are absolutely transparent to our customer base about what the cost is and how it's being raised, and it's not volumetric. We also can do discounts to our customers if they do things on their lots like green infrastructure to reduce the amount of stormwater generated, which is a wonderful incentive to help green your city. Second, we've adopted automatic meter reading. In fact, did so more than 10 years ago. So while we've been raising rates on our customer, we communicate with them much better. Our most successful program probably to date on that front has been called HUNA, High Use Notification Alert. You're a customer of ours and you have a leak in your toilet. Usually you wouldn't know about it until you got a bill the next month with a much higher charge, which drives everybody crazy. It makes the customer mad because they didn't know they were using the water. We're like any utility. You leave the lights on in a room and don't use that room, well, you're still going to get charged for electricity. Same's true for water, but we have a fight with a customer over water they didn't know they want to use, and that creates bad feelings. So now with an automatic meter reading system, which means we're getting data into us automatically by computer, we notify any customer by email, text, or call, robocall, if their use goes out of a predetermined band. We send out thousands of them. And it's wonderful what that means to the consumer. And so while their rates are going up, they feel they're being treated better. And it's amazing what a difference that makes. Third, we have an aggressive program as we increase rates so substantially to cover our low-income customers. Washington, D.C. is essentially a city of wealth and poverty. There's almost no middle-class people in the district. If you are in the middle class, you live outside of town. It's just such an expensive city. There are very poor pockets and there's very wealthy pockets. And the challenge in raising rates is always to those of lower and fixed income. So we have a CAP program in D.C. where if you satisfy federal guidelines for low income, for heating assistance, we do not make someone who is poor come back to us and prove that they're poor again. It is an incredible indignity Once you prove it on that other front, that satisfies our program, and you get the first 4 CCFs, which is 100 cubic feet of water and sewer use for free, subsidized by all the other customers, and we've never had a challenge from our other customers that that isn't a good program. We have a number of other things that we do for our low-income customers, but we knew we had to have a strategy to cover that base. 4, you can do so many things with financing. DC Water was the first enterprise in the United States to have a green certified bond. There have been other green bonds, but we had ours independent certified by a company, so people could invest in us knowing their money was going to a green project. People want to invest. We had more people coming into the deal. That meant we had more demand than supply. The interest rate went down. We saved money to our ratepayers. We also did the first issuance of a century bond ever for a municipal water utility. Our big tunnels are rated by engineers to have a minimum useful life of 100 years. So we put out our liability to match the useful life of the asset and did the financing for 100 years. That reduces your cost each year to ratepayers. That's another option you can take. Last 2 I'll mention is partnering with private firms. I see my pals from Veolia here, their U.S. operations based here in Chicago. We work regularly with private companies. We are a public enterprise. We maintain control of the system. I always tell private companies, I want to know what's best in the world. I want to know how to bring it to our ratepayers, and I want to know how to do it cost-effective wise. And we are partnering, and we have with Veolia and many other companies to do just that. We do design build. We do anything we can think of to work with private firms. Last, and what's the newest step, DC Water is a service enterprise. We do not stop in serving just in providing water and sewer service. We're now branching out to offer other services to our customers or to other utilities. If you're a small utility in this room, we have something called Blue Drop. You'd like some help doing external affairs from your peers in another public agency that are very sensitive to explaining what we do in a public context, we'll offer that service to you for a less cost than would probably cost you to go somewhere else, and you'll be helped by someone in your own industry. That's good for you because it's less cost than you building that service at your own place from the ground up. And it's good for us because we've already paid to build that service for ourselves. So by offering it as a fee for service for other utilities, both are better off. I call that P squared, public to public partnerships. We are doing license agreements. We are taking products to market. We have done our first 3 patents for products that we want to gain revenue from. If our ratepayers invested in that research, we want to turn it into a revenue stream. So while there is enormous challenges in our industry that are mind-boggling, $1 trillion and billions of dollars that can overcome, the good news is that we have the best product ever. People ask me, how many lives do you save? And I always say, all of them. There's no element that NASA looks for water on Mars. Why? It's the only element we know that supports every living organism. Who gets to deliver that to us? We do. How many jobs do you support? I always say all of them. You cannot get a certificate of occupancy. You cannot be in this building. You cannot be in any building without our services. Who else gets to have that service? If we're creative about what we can do, and our industry is filled with creative people because you solve problems every day, we work on the side of angels and everything is possible. So thanks so much.
Thank you. That was terrific. Thank you. We have time for a couple questions from the audience for George. Raise your hand. Questions? Oh, come on. It was great. Oh, great. We have Kristen in the back.
Hi, I'm Kristen Ray, Evanston Water Utility. Oh, thanks. I'd really like to know more about the process for issuing those century bonds. And I mean, in any kind of bond that's longer than your typical 20 to 30-year life. There's probably a lot more to say on it than the time we have right now, but if you could just go into that in a little more depth, I'd be really interested in the logistics of that.
Sure. It was a fascinating project. I must say I've done a lot. We just went to market last week for another $350 million of debt financing. So I've done a lot of this and working with rating agencies and all the rest. I was actually in New York in Goldman Sachs offices up on the 40th floor looking out over the Hudson as we went to market that day. You can technically take out debt financing as long as you want, as long as there's an investor willing to buy the bond. So there's nothing that prohibits an enterprise from offering a 60-year bond or a 100-year bond. But you have to have a market to buy it, and you have to have a reason to give it. If we were trying to spread out costs to future ratepayers just because we wanted to reduce current costs, we would have been challenged that we were putting costs to our children and our children's children that should be born today. We took exactly the opposite tact, which is the design life, minimum design life of our tunnels. In fact, they're built by gravity, so most of the time there's no moving parts. They're 100 feet, 10 stories underground. The engineers tell us we won't even need significant maintenance for 100 years. And it's designed to provide a service for at least 100 years. So we took the position and take the position that it's not fair to make a 30-year or a 20-year group of ratepayers pay for a solution designed to provide a service over 100 years. This was the opposite of putting costs on your children for the wrong reason. It was doing it for the right reason if it's designed to help them too. Everybody who is designed to help should participate in funding such a large project. As I said, the largest public works project in Washington, D.C., and the largest project D.C. Water will ever build. So that meant we had an engineering justification. We matched assets to liabilities with a 100-year minimum life to a 100-year bond. Turns out that that is a taxable bond because there isn't a tax-exempt market that goes out that far. We got rated by the rating agencies and went on a road show to investors who were fascinated. We aren't the first century bond ever issued, just the first century. There's not many of them, but it's mostly been universities. And we made the same claim. DC Water will be here 100 years. Water facility, this is not like buggy whips that are going to be out of, not be used anymore. Water is going to be here in 100 years, so it's a safe bet. This system will be used. We have sewers from 150 years ago. This will be in place 100 years from now. So all of those issues lined up, and here's the last capstone of it. We were going to sell $300 million of century bond that day. Like I said, when we started the day, we didn't even know for sure whether anyone was going to buy them. When we went to market, we had over $400 million of buy orders that allowed us to increase the size of the issuance by another $50 million. And we dropped the basis points by 16 basis points. And to us, that meant $600,000 for our ratepayers per basis point because we had more demand than supply. And that allows you to reduce the interest rate you're paying the buyers because they want to buy your bond. So it only turned out well for our ratepayers on every front.
Great. Any other question? We have time for one more. Yes, Mark.
Do you generate
if
any
you could wait for the
revenue
mic.
through taxes, or is it all user fees?
Sorry, can you say it again, Mark?
My question is, do you generate any revenue through taxes, or is it all through user fees?
No, and we're very careful about that. As you're probably aware, 40% of Washington, D.C. is government, and they don't pay taxes. Everybody pays fees. A fee is for a service. That was a battle we fought at one point because when we created the impervious area charge, the biggest owner of land in Washington, D.C. is the federal government. So they are paying us the largest portion of the revenue we need from that fee. And they tried to claim that's a tax, not a fee, and we don't pay taxes. But we challenged them in court and in Congress and beat them in both places because this is an absolute fee. You only pay it because the system is necessary. The stormwater from your lot rolls into it. We wouldn't charge it if we weren't building it. A tax you collect and use for good deeds. A fee you collect and only use for the service that it is collected for. And that's what we do. So we're a 100% fee-based enterprise.
Great. Thank you, George. I want to continue on here and introduce our second speaker, Jordan Dorfman of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Jordan is here with us today to talk about the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, otherwise known as WIFIA, quite familiar to many people in the room. And we're excited to hear the latest updates on what's happening with that. Thanks, Jordan.
First of all, I'll give a little background about what WIFIA is for those of you who don't know. It's a new innovative finance program created by Congress last year in 2014. We've yet to make any loans. We don't have any appropriations yet, so we're working on that. We started last year with some preliminary development. We had listening sessions around the country. We were here in Chicago with one of those. We've met with stakeholders and interested parties to try to get their views on how the program should operate. We've been developing timelines that are constantly changing because, again, we don't know what's going on with Congress. And we're planning for potential appropriations. So that's what we're doing right now. We did receive $2.2 million to develop the program for FY 2015, And I think that gives a good indication that Congress is interested in the development of the program. Again, it's an innovative finance program for water-related infrastructure. Have any of you heard of TIFIA, the transportation program? It is almost modeled exactly word for word on the original TIFIA language, which of course was changed recently. Why Congress didn't use the new language for TIFIA, I don't know, or for WIFIA. Specifically for projects of national or regional significance. What that means to us is it's potentially for very large projects. And from what we understand, it attempts to fill in a gap, a perceived gap left open by the SRF programs for really large projects. And I'm sure we'll hear about whether or not that's true, whether or not there's that gap in Illinois. There might not be. But again, that's going to be our focus on very large projects. The program itself can fund projects of $20 million or greater, but honestly, we feel that that's a priority for SRF programs, and they can really meet that need. We're looking at projects that are probably $100 million or greater. Now, the funds that are appropriated are not used for direct loans. The funds are actually used as a subsidy reserve. This is a requirement of the Federal Credit Reform Act from 1990. It basically says that the federal government or federal agencies cannot simply make loans without there being a cost in the budget. So for each dollar that TIFIA, for each dollar that's appropriated to the TIFIA program, they're able to make $10 in loans. That's a 10-to-1 ratio that we feel we can do a lot better than in the water program because, as you all know, defaults in the water industry, in the wastewater industry, are almost non-existent. There have been many defaults in transportation on the types of projects that TIFIA has been funding, very often due to, you're talking mainly about toll roads, whether or not those toll expectations are met. Revenue in water and wastewater is pretty constant and pretty well established. So if we're looking at 10-to-1 as a minimum, if we're appropriated $10 million, that's the potential of $100 million in loans, or maybe $1 billion in loans. We feel pretty confident that we might be looking at a ratio of 100-to-1. So for a $10 million appropriation, which out of what's the general budget of the federal government every year, a couple of trillion, $10 million seems very small, and it's also not taking a piece out of the SRF programs. $10 million, we think is a pretty small investment to basically get maybe up to $1 billion worth of projects. Now, that credit assistance can be in the form of loans or guarantees, but we expect it to be primarily loans. I can go through a little bit of the eligibilities and what the types of projects we're looking at. Anything that is eligible under the SRF program, so any of your basic water or wastewater type projects will be eligible under WIFIA. But we are pretty determined to create priorities within the program, priorities that meet the administration's goals. So we're probably going to be looking more towards the water reuse type projects as opposed to your traditional pipe and plant projects. Those traditional pipe and plant projects were usually being funded by SRFs, by tax-exempt bonds that get very low rates. WIFIA might be looking more towards those more innovative projects, more water reuse, possibly desalination plants in some parts of the country. Borrowers can be anywhere from private to public, so there's certainly no limitations there. And again, as I mentioned, $20 million would be the floor, though for small communities we can do $5 million projects. I would find it very unusual or very surprising if any small communities came in to the WIFIA program. So where are we right now? Again, as I mentioned, we've not received appropriations. However, we are working right now towards the President's FY17 budget. So we're doing a lot of work towards getting into that budget, and one of the things we need to do, and we're doing right now, is creating a subsidy model. And that subsidy model is what gets us to that 10-to-1 or 100-to-1 ratio. That model has to be approved by OMB, the Office of Management and Budget. It's basically the White House. And when we get that final approval and they're okay with the numbers and they agree with our policy positions, we might be in the FY17 budget. If we are in the FY17 budget, we feel that there is a good chance that Congress will appropriate funds for the program because they've initially invested a little bit in the development of the program. Of course, you've all seen the news. You know where Congress is right now as far as appropriations bills and everything else they need to take care of. So that, your guess is as good as ours as far as what's going to happen down the line. Some of the important factors, some of the important considerations of the program, interest rates are set at the long-term treasury bonds. So right now around 3%. And one of the most important, I guess, prohibitions within the program right now is that we can fund 49% of the project costs. The remaining 51% cannot be funded by tax-exempt bonds. So that was done for scoring purposes, but it still exists. It's a pretty big obstacle, we think, especially for a lot of municipalities that typically rely on tax-exempt bonds. This would potentially make getting a WIFIA loan more expensive than tax-exempt financing, which we understand would certainly make the program somewhat unattractive. We can have repayments go out to 35 years. There are other considerations that might make the WIFIA loans attractive, but we are hopeful. I'm hopeful, I won't see this as an administration position, I'm hopeful personally that that prohibition is removed, and there is language to remove that prohibition in the two transportation authorization bills, both on the House and Senate side, that must be passed by November or December this year, or all transportation funds will stop flowing to the states. So we're hoping that because of that, it gets through and we can get rid of that prohibition and make WIFIA a lot more attractive. Again, this is a program we expect for large projects around the country, $100 million or more, and hopefully some sort of innovative type programs. I'd love to hear from any of you if you find this program to actually be somewhat attractive or as a potential tool for financing large projects. We've heard from some large municipalities that are interested. Again, though, that prohibition on tax-exempt financing might push us more towards P3 type projects. If any of those are out there, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jordan. So we have time for a couple questions for Jordan. Any from the audience? Yes, I'm going to come around to you.
Thank you. Hello, Harold Jensen with Veolia. I think you alluded to it at the end, but Mike's not.
Yep, it's good.
Thanks. You mentioned P3 projects at the end. Does that mean that the WIFIA program would be accessible to private investors as well?
Absolutely. And right now, that's where the most of the interest is coming from, is from the investor-owned community and other private investors. Because obviously this type of loan would be very advantageous to private borrowers. Again, that prohibition being potentially in the way of public borrowers.
Great. Another question? Yes, Marianne.
So you mentioned the threshold was 100 million, basically. A project would have to be a size of 100 million to be qualified for the WIFIA package.
The threshold is actually 20 million. What we're possibly driving at as policy would be to look for projects that are 100 million.
I see, okay.
We're trying, and again, we're trying not to compete with the state revolving fund programs. We feel they're both very important programs, specifically for smaller or mid-sized communities, and we don't want to in any way compete or push the SRF programs out.
So here's my question. Could utilities partner together in a region to do, say, a green infrastructure project, like a big stormwater project, and collaborate together and submit a combined application?
Absolutely. That's one of the authorities within the program is multiple communities applying under one application for a larger project. So each community may only need $4 or $5 million, but combined it gets over that threshold. One application, that's fine.
Great. We're going to go on to the next speaker. So it's my privilege to introduce Director Lisa Bonnet from the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. Happy to have you here today. She's going to be able to talk and respond to both the recommendations report that we've been working on over the past year that recently came out as of today, as well as what they're working on at their office with regards to changing up some new rules with regards to the State Revolving Fund. Lisa, thank you for being here.
Thank you, and thank you, Metropolitan Planning Council, to really provide an opportunity for me to talk with you today. I'm not comfortable holding a mic, so if I hit Jordan with it, I apologize. So it's really a great opportunity, and I think, you know, the thing, many of you, you've heard me speak before, but Illinois really is in a great position. While you heard from Danielle what our need is, which is tremendous, Illinois really still has an incredible asset through the State Revolving Fund that is really going to really lend itself to Illinois getting jump-started on some of our water quality issues. So as you know, we're the agency that administers the State Revolving Fund, and we have done that for a very long time. And in 2013, we partnered with the IFA to do a financing program that basically gave us a capacity of $2 billion to utilize to do water quality infrastructure. The other thing that we've done in the last 2 years is go into the legislature and open our eligibilities so that we were able to take the opportunity and use this asset to do more than just our sort of traditional wastewater and drinking water facilities. Although they're great, their need is great, and we really appreciate the work that they undertake. The good news for us today is that really those facilities are greater than 95% compliant, right? And so while we have work to do there, I think the opportunities for Illinois is to look at as stormwater and at our non-point sources and really the impact that they're having. As we look across sort of the water quality issues of today, and I think I've said this more times than I probably should, really stormwater and non-point sources is the water quality issue that we're facing today. Our treatment plants, while they have challenges with their distribution systems and there's a lot of work to do there, they're also being impacted by the runoff that's coming from stormwater and agriculture sort of non-point sources. And so my team, which has been led by Ryan McQuarrie and Marcia Wilhite, we've had a couple of years of really trying to plan and think about how Illinois can take advantage of a very large asset. I mean, the nice thing about the State Revolving Fund, and you think Washington has challenges, Illinois has their own challenges with budget, is that, that money just it's single purpose, it stays with us, it doesn't go in fund sweeps. And so the potential of this asset, $2 billion, is just getting started. I mean, you heard Danielle talk about we issued $500 million in loans. So, as you just turn that money and you revolve that money and we continue to work with IFA, we're really over the next 20 years looking at a very large asset of multiple billions of dollars of opportunities and investment. And so we're really excited. We do have a couple things going on. We have a stakeholder group that we are working on, so we've completely modernized our loan rules. One of the things that we hear from communities is that our process is cumbersome, and so we've undertaken a complete rule rewrite of our program. We're focusing now on wastewater, but drinking water is soon to come for those of you in the audience that are interested, so that we get you your money when you need it, and we give it to you with the least amount of effort, that is outside of just the federal requirements. We heard from Jordan, that the default rate is just almost non-existent. Now, I'll tell you, we're seeing some communities that, are having some hardship issues, and part of our work with our stakeholder group is to really look at how we can start to look for compliance and these small communities with tools less than an enforcement effort. So our stakeholder group is also looking at our financing structure and what we're doing with interest rates and where we're offering discounts. And should we be incentivizing things like green infrastructure, water conservation, or these hardship communities that are having difficulty? Because again, as we look through the compliance and sort of our water quality issue, it's not coming from a Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. God love you. These small communities are really, really struggling with what is becoming very sophisticated plants, very sophisticated financing, which is, the financing alone is generally without, sort of outside the purview of their local governments and is expensive to do. And so we want you to use the state revolving fund. We have these assets. As I said, we partnered with IFA. We're just getting started at $2 billion. And so we're looking to do this in the most effective, quickest way we can possibly get this money on the street. Because all of these things actually are economic development, but they're also good for our ratepayers. I mean, we really heard from George on the perspective that they're using with their ratepayers, and that is germane because they need ratepayers need to understand why they're facing these type of rates, but also they need to understand how they can take charge of their own destiny. Water conservation, working with municipalities to disconnect downspouts. One of the things that we're really excited about is how we work with municipalities to do those homeowner type of projects, those stormwater projects that are not traditional, sort of building a treatment system. And so we've heard from MWRD and we've got a work group looking at how we can loan through a municipality who then can get those BMPs coming from homeowners or stormwater practices, that when you measure them and you look at the water quality impact, what you find is that the gains that you received in water quality actually are what the treatment technology could have been if we had invested at the wastewater treatment facility or at the drinking water facility. And I think that's the nexus that's going to be great. And I think that's, sort of as we look at working with MWRD and their communities and stormwater, I think as we begin to think about how to measure and think differently about stormwater and non-point source and look at what it really means to our traditional treatment systems, I think that's when we're going to have sort of the perfect formula for financing. The other thing I would say, how am I doing over here? I'm looking for my 5-minute. The other challenge on the non-point source and the stormwater, which again, is really sort of our challenge today, is that a lot of local governments don't have the user rate structure that can then be pledged toward, this type of financing. And so, as we think broader about the use of our water use fees and how to think about those for a municipality, I think that's also going to be key to think about how to deal with non-point source and stormwater runoff. So again, I think Illinois just has a lot of opportunity here to really invest. We need to be lean and mean about it. We need to pick those projects. And our agency is really sort of trying to put together that framework about how to do that. And what I will say to you is we need all of you to do this. I think one of the things Danielle talked about as we were getting ready is that the message today is that there's a big lift, but look at the people in the room and what we can collectively do. And that's the message today. Illinois has assets. We have an ability to invest in our communities, in our facilities, in lowering our ratepayers' pay. But we need to set that up in Illinois, and that's different for us at the Illinois EPA because we only traditionally funded traditional wastewater and drinking water infrastructure projects. And so we're looking for lots of partners. We're working with DNR because they do urban flooding. We've been talking with CNT. We've just MPC. We're looking for partners to help us get this going. We've also met with IFA recently and Jim Gebhardt from US EPA so that we can be innovative in our financing and to get this money on the street. And so I think there's better things to come on that end as well. So, I'm talking faster, 5 minutes, excellent. Exactly. I'll just do a few other things that, we've been working on. So we've also been working on water loss audits. And, a lot of our focus has been how to give communities the tools and understanding that they need to really effectively manage their water, wastewater treatment, or to understand the impact of stormwater coming. And so we've had these teams that we've been putting together. We've also been a small community initiative. One of the things is I, sat in my desk and signed documents and referrals. I kept coming across all these referrals to little small communities for water quality violations, and I just couldn't come. I just did not see how that was improving water quality because I can sue you all day long, and a small community can go get an attorney. But at the end of the day, we spend a lot of money, and seriously, 5 years later, we have not improved water quality. So under Marcia's team and Sanjay Sofa, we've developed what is called the Small Community Program. And we're doing sort of threefold there. We're doing technical assistance, we're doing training, And then we, again, as I talked about in the work group that we've got with the, we're looking at discounted interest factors for these communities so that once they're ready for a compliance project and we have identified that, their last sort of step is here to do an infrastructure investment, that they are able to get the financing that they need and can afford in order to do this. And every one of these that we do when we get back into compliance helps all of us, right? Because the waters just flow. The one thing I've sort of learned in the water world is there's no definite boundaries, there's just no definite boundaries. And so I think just, a mix of all of these as Illinois EPA turns our focus into more of I'll say less regulatory, but more of how do we achieve water quality improvements outside of our normal tools? This is where we see the opportunities with the State Revolving Fund and with you as the stakeholders to help us get there. So we're really excited, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you today. And I hope that you will engage with us and Marcia and Ryan as we continue to try to chart this path to really get going and utilize the assets that Illinois has. So thank you with that.
Thank you, Director Bonnet. So raise your hand if you knew that there was $2 billion in the SRF fund. So we do have some people that knew that, but how incredible is that?
Yeah.
There's money at the state level, and it's moving. We just got to get those applications in, right? So who's got questions for Director Bonnet? Yes.
Thanks. You had mentioned, it touched very briefly on creative financing going forward. And we had heard recently that there was going to be maybe a move toward longer-term loans than the standard 20 years. Could you update any progress regarding that?
Sure. We absolutely are putting in place an opportunity for 30-year loans. Our work group, our stakeholder group now is considering 30-year loans for hardship community or small communities. Part of the challenge that we have found with 30-year loans is one, as George indicated, we don't just get to say, okay, it's a 30-year loan for you. It really has to have a useful life, and so the engineering would have to be done for that. But also, when you look at a revolving fund and the cost of a 30-year loan when you're in a financing program, opening it for all comers is just really cost prohibitive in ensuring that the asset, sort of maintains. So we've done some work in other states and looking what other states, and so the work group is considering, like in Ohio, you can get a 30-year loan on a CSO project that, and like up to $20 million. So, different states are offering longer-term financing based on some different parameters, either hardship or to incentivize certain types of projects. And so that's under consideration in Illinois. We have a capacity model where we're costing, this to understand what the total cost of the program is. And so we're looking at it, and I know there's a lot of interest on 30-year loans, but I do not believe we would launch on 30-year loans available to everyone. So I don't want to set that expectation, but we're definitely looking. We looked at the pool of small communities or communities under 25,000, and a lot of communities would be able to participate, even if we left it at hardship or small community. But we are looking at how to do, do we want to do CSOs? I'm sort of interested in your community sort of approach to stormwater, to something like that lend itself to looking at a longer term. And so we're open for discussion. If you have ideas, I know that there was a lot of interest in it being an opportunity for everyone. But from a financial perspective, that's a costly program when you're in a financing program.
Great, thank you. Another question for Director Bonnet?
Yeah, I have a question, and I will say that I was pleasantly surprised to hear about this $2 billion. But I want to ask you, is now an access to this money since there's a gridlock in Springfield with the budget?
Our ability to issue loans is not impacted. So we still have all the same authorizations Now, the reimbursements may be impacted. The capital budget is actually in place. And so I don't think that our payments are impacted at this point. And so, so I think we're okay. And like I say, you know, depending on which side of the coin you're on, you know, the best thing is this funding stays with us, right? So even, you know, with the gridlock or once it passes, you know, the money stays in the fund and in the program because it is absolutely single purpose use only.
Other questions for Director Bonnet? Kristen in the back.
I've been doing a lot of loan projects over the last few years, and I've noticed that every single time there seems to be a new form or a new procedure or something is different. And, you know, I probably know the procedure as well or better than most people just because I've had a lot of experience over the last few years, so I can only imagine it's very difficult for communities that only do this once in a blue moon to navigate the process. And so I was wondering what the plans are to streamline that planning process, and beyond that, to have, you know, guidance or kind of a one-stop shop on the website, which has gotten much better, don't get me wrong. There have been a lot of improvements, and I acknowledge that. But I think there's still room for more to make the process really, really clear from pre-application to final loan amendment.
Thank you. And I absolutely agree with everything you just said. In fact, the nice thing about the new draft rule that the stakeholder group is, it walks you through the application process. So no more this thing over here talks about this, and then you get down to 3 other sections and it talks about it again. So we very much methodically walk you through the application process. I'll also take responsibility for the myriad of new forms and things that you're working with because, you know, we can't pause the program. It's just a continually growing program. And so we're just constantly trying to improve and to communicate to people of what the requirements are. The work group for the rules, which if you don't participate in the stakeholder group, we can still get them to you. We cited to you the requirement. Everything we ask you to do as a loan applicant, we told you why we had to ask you that. Either the federal government required it, and we gave you the exact site of the federal law that required it, or state statute required it. The things that are state statute, we can discuss. But we really tried to take a different approach to sending us paper and copies of stuff and, you know, just doing more checklists, certifications, you know, those things on the items that you can take responsibility for, but you have to hold in your file. We're going to tell you that. You must have this in your file for 5 years, but don't send it to us. So we really, we're trying to do that. And I'm hopeful at some point that we have the end game and we say, here's the packet, here's exactly what you need. But I think if you read the new rules, you're going to get a sense of it's way clearer as to what the loan requirements are and exactly the documents that you have to send us. So I appreciate the comments. I agree with you, and I hope you'll find remarkable differences in what you see in our rule.
Great, thank you for that. I have a quick question. So on that topic, related to website reworking and maybe packaging of more efficient bundlings of applications, are we going to be able to expect that coming out soon?
It is. We are, Ryan is leading with our public information team to work on the website and to get it better. We're looking at Ohio. So we like Ohio. A lot of what we see in Ohio, our rules look a lot like Ohio. And so we've got a template. And so now we're reorganizing the information. And so hopefully you'll find that better as well soon.
Great, thank you. Other questions for Director Bonnet? And just a reminder, if you're taking the mic, if you could please state your name and affiliation.
Good afternoon. Jeff Freeman with Engineering Enterprises. We're a consulting engineer. Kristen did a great job of identifying one of the 2 main reasons why communities might not use the loan program. The second reason often is time. And it often takes a long time, it seems, to get through the program based on other funding options. You mentioned streamlining the process, which will certainly help that. Are there any specifics that you can talk about today that have improved the time to get through the process, either by eliminating things or internal controls?
So I'll just kind of talk about internal controls and measures and some of the benchmarking and metrics that we're looking at. So, and then I'll try to articulate. I don't know that I can articulate, absolute specifics of what you'll no longer have to do. But so my team sends me a project list every week that tells me the loans that are in play and what stage the loan is in. And Marcia and Ryan and myself, we watch that every week to make sure that the loans are proceeding. There's start dates of when you made application. There are dates that we monitor to see where our reviews are coming. We've also matched up the permitting with the loan applicant to ensure that when you're in for a loan, that your permit is also being acted upon so that we don't have the disconnect between the permitting side and the loan side. So we have metrics on how many loans we're issuing and the time frame of which we're issuing. And one of the things, when I have been in state government and actually at the Environmental Protection Agency for way more years than I like to admit, and some of what we are, I would say that our average time to loan now is 6 months. I will say 6 to 9 months. But the perception of the longevity is really, really hard to overcome. And so part of what we're trying to do is do the outreach and to talk to communities and say, come, you want a loan, come see us, we'll walk with you, we'll put a team together and we'll walk with you till you get a loan. And so we're trying to make it move faster, but it is definitely on our radar, and we have metrics, and we're watching the movement in our own organization. And hopefully the rules will result in you sending us less copies of paper and less things, because that is our goal as well.
Great. So I'd like to open up to a general discussion of any of the speakers, and as well, any of the speakers have questions. Yeah, go for it, George.
I wanted to make a comment, and first I can say things about the WIFIA proposal that you can't. The industry is pushing very strongly in Washington to support WIFIA. We think the requirement that you could not apply unless you did not use tax-exempt financing is asinine and has absolutely no rational basis in any argument I've seen in print or in verbal anywhere, anytime. It's just, it seems mean-spirited. But if it,
I can tell you exactly where it came from.
if there's any we know where it came from. I'm talking about what reason there is. There's no. I've heard most of the reasons, and they all make no sense to me whatsoever. But separate from that, what I've heard really from Director Bonnet, and connected to your question, personally, even though DC Water is not the audience for either of these kinds of programs, in my view, we did all-in financing at a little under 4% ourselves, tax exempt. We probably wouldn't go to WIFIA. We do drinking water and clean water revolving fund, because for DC, we're the only recipient. But I truly believe that the enterprises that need this support the most, that there ought to be 3 tests. One is the community seeking the funding, regardless of its size, financially stressed? The manner of which you'd measure that would be an interesting question. But there are communities out there of various sizes that are having real economic problems with their core tax base, the people they have living in their cities or their communities, whether they're small or big. And that would be my first target. Who are the communities that need it the most because they're most financially stressed? Secondly, rather than having a trigger based on gross size, like 20 million or 100 billion, how big is the project relative to the revenue of the enterprise? So that a small organization that has a smaller budget, they might have a small project in the grand scheme of comparing it to our billion-dollar projects. But to them and their rate base, it's as large or bigger relative to their revenue stream than anything we would build, in which case they need that support more than we do. Then the third test I would deploy is, can you, for small communities in particular, can you band together to have multiple communities work on common ends? Because the fixed costs that go into every single project, whether it be application, timing, who's doing the work, for every little community to do it is almost prohibitive out of the gate, no matter how efficient you get. Unless smaller communities band together to jointly do stormwater, to jointly manage a drinking water issue or a distribution system, or an asset management program where you can have a enterprise come in and provide asset management services to a number of different small places at a lower cost for each, but will go in as joint. So to me, that would be the 3 ways I'd come at the program.
Wonderful. Other questions? You're a quiet group. Oh, Chris, please.
Lisa, I understood earlier that you were going to perhaps change the loan eligibility to include work on private property, the downspouts example. Is that expanding? So would you be able to use the loan monies to work on water service replacements and other improvements to eliminate clear water?
Yes. I mean, basically, Illinois opened the legislation to allow whatever WIRTA or SRF allowed. So any project allowed by the federal authorization is now allowed in Illinois.
Okay, so I'll ask the question of US EPA. Is work on private property eligible for the SRF?
Work on private property, yes, work on private property for the most part. I mean, there are obviously restrictions.
There has to be a water quality impact. You know, you have to be able to determine water improvement. So it can't just be conveyance of water, but you know, really making that nexus is not that difficult. And so, you know, we very much, working with MWRD to look at, you know, doing some of these home type of projects of downspouts and green infrastructure type of things.
Other questions?
If I can just also say, we really want to applaud the effort that you're undertaking, just to, especially to streamline the program in light of all of the new requirements that we've essentially been placing on you. Not on our own. I know, no, it's not you. It's absolutely not. It's not. We don't want to do it either, but you know, there's been a lot of changes in the law. But really, I mean, that's really great, and it's something we'd like to see a lot of other states do as well.
Wonderful. Jordan, since you have the mic, I have a question for you. With US EPA, you know, looking at rolling out WIFIA, certainly we're all waiting for the appropriations that'll hopefully come. What strategic outreach are you doing to the state administrators of the State Revolving Fund so that they're hearing exactly what you're saying today, which is we're not in competition, we want to take the higher threshold and make sure that both funds are viable and available for communities?
Well, one thing we always do participate in is the Council of Infrastructure Finance Authorities meetings that take place 2 times a year, and I will speak at that and at the work group meetings that we have with all the state EPA, the state SRF programs. And what we're trying to do also is work alongside the SRF programs to find those projects that might benefit from financing from both programs. So a co-funded project between the SRF and WIFIA. It might be that those large projects that the SRF programs might not generally reach, but might be funding partially. There are many states that will provide loans over a number of years to try to get something complete. If we can step in and get that done faster with a WIFIA loan, we'd certainly love to do that. And we've been talking to a number of states who've shown some interest, California being a primary source of interest because of all of the needs that they have out there right now. But other states as well, and we were thinking of setting up a meeting trying to meet with you. So, you know,
great. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Carolyn in the back. Again, name, affiliation. Thank you.
Hi, Carolyn Greaves with Baxter and Woodman, and I have another question on the SRF loan process. And you had mentioned stormwater and non-point source projects as some project opportunities for loans, and I was curious if there have been any loan applications or loans yet on those types of projects, and if so, what kind are getting the funding?
We do not have loans for sort of the green infrastructure projects that we were funding through the grant programs over the last few years. So we don't have any actual loan applications in for that, but we do have a couple of loan applications in for stormwater projects. So a couple are starting to come in, but there's not a big line yet, which is what we need, right? We need a big line. And so that's part of the challenge for my staff and for you guys to help us with is, you know, to sort of figure out how to do that. As we talked about our work with MWRD and the communities that they serve, And so I think that's another opportunity to get launched into stormwater projects so that people can see what it's going to mean and what it's going to take to do stormwater. The other challenge with stormwater is the dedicated revenues. And some communities are limited on their water use ordinances of what those can be used for and how far they stretch. And so I think that's also a challenge to get more loans in for stormwater projects.
Great. Other questions? Yes, Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Brohl from World Business Chicago. This question's for you, George. I can't see you, but you mentioned some of the patents that you guys have developed and licensing them as a revenue source, and I was curious if you could talk a little bit more about that and ways in which you're encouraging that kind of innovation.
Sure. It's one of the most exciting things. By the way, doing innovation is one of its side benefits that does actually go back to the financial picture that you're presenting to your ratepayers. It's exciting when you start doing interesting and new things. And we're getting tremendous talent coming into DC Water because folks want to come and join to do some of these really fun things. It's not the original reason you do it, but it's just as much to performance per dollar spent is the people you have doing the work. And I'm trying to build a Super Bowl team of water, and we just get better talent in the door. And licensing is one of the ideas. We actually have a very robust research program at DC Water at very low cost. We partner with private firms and local universities. At any given time, we usually have 30 to 40 PhD level research projects going on about something to do with our system where it's all applied research. How can we do something better? And up till 4 or 5 years ago, we would help invent something, and it never occurred to our enterprise, well, our ratepayers that help pay, we should turn that into a revenue stream because that's what's going to happen anyways. Someone's going to take the ideas that we create and turn it into a product and sell it, and that's fine. Private sector is very well set up to do it. But if DC Water ratepayers were part of the process that invested and developed the research, we should also gain that money back for our ratepayers. Just a few weeks ago, we signed a deal with WIFIA, the Water Environment Research Federation. We have a joint patent and license where all the revenue that comes from that is going to go into a fund that we will administer only for more research. And what I want to have is a fully self-funded research program so I can actually take ratepayer money out of it entirely. But we've had Blue Plains is a very, very large facility. We've got a really good research program going. We probably have 3 or 4 innovative technologies that have been either patented or patent pending. And we have a lot of interest in private firms. The idea is that DC Water would not go out and do what the private sector is good at, but we part of the license because we helped create the intellectual property behind it. And also what we're prepared to do is provide service and advice to the other public entity that wants to implement it. So as a quick example, just the week before, we had this big announcement of this gigantic waste poop-to-power plant that we built, using a technology that had never been used before in North America called Canby. And we've used it at a larger scale at our plant than anywhere in the world. Canby is a private company. Anyone can hire Canby if they want to. But if an enterprise has got to implement Canby on their site, we have tremendous experience now about how to do that. So we're offering that service. In parallel with Canby selling their product, private sector is better off. We can advise a public entity how to go about as the owner of the facility of incorporating kind of new technology on site, how to build a research program, how to implement. And it's generated incredible excitement. Next week, we launched something called SIP DC Water, which is our Shared Innovations Program. It'll be on a social media website. Any employee of the enterprise can suggest an idea about anything we do, about how to do it better. The first idea we got was how to build the bar that's used to open up a manhole. It's actually really low and it was hurt your back. So one of our employees built in his shop a longer, and we patented it. We're putting for a patent, we're going to sell that. And that's our example. It doesn't have to be a whiz-bang thing on a phone. It can be the kind of thing you open with a manhole. If you have a better way to write the permit, if the thing isn't fast enough, if you put that box over here, the whole permit would go faster. If we put these 3 things, I don't care what it is. If you've got an idea, and it can make us do ourselves better, faster, cheaper, we want to know it. And we have a budget set aside, not a big one, to pilot the best of them. And then we'll roll them into the enterprise. We hope to license them and turn them back around. I think it's one of the futures we have to look at.
Yeah, of course.
Just to piggyback on what George is saying, in Illinois, we're doing a couple of things. One of the things that I think is a great opportunity, especially maybe for the mid-sized type of wastewater facilities, is to really look at those opportunities to take what would have been traditionally a waste stream and make it a product or something that is a revenue. You know, many of you have heard me, I'm very intrigued with digesters and sort of this poop to energy concept. And you know, I've got a team that's sort of working to think about how that can be. We also did legislation for exceptional quality biosolids. And, you know, that's an opportunity for municipalities to look at, you know, a revenue stream coming in to help offset some of the rate-paying increases. And so, again, you know, sort of Illinois is trying to launch these things and look at them, and we're looking for partners who would like to sort of jump off and take an opportunity. And these are type of projects that could be funded through SRF as well.
Real quickly add on it, but you're exactly right on. And this new program we just opened, we had, to give you a sense of scale at Blue Plains, this room is about the size of one of our tanker trucks full of biosolids, and that's a euphemism for really smelly, horrendous stuff. We were launching our new logo, and one of the trucks went by, had the mayor and all these people pulling down this card of the logo, and one of the trucks went by and everybody, and the whole thing almost fell over backwards. Well, we had Class B biosolids, and we generate 60 tanker trucks a day. 1,200 tons of wet tons of this material. After the poop to power process, just to give you a sense of numbers, 1,000 colonies of this of bacteria per 100 milliliters is what is Class A, which is the cleanest. We're measuring down around 10. So it is almost purified, and it hasn't been launched yet, but we're going to turn it into a product that we can sell in a store. So keep your eye out, because we have enough of it. We want to sell it here too. But there is no such thing as a waste. There's only a wasted asset. We could turn all these things into revenue. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So isn't water services fun? I mean, we talk about the most fascinating things that come up. Any other questions? Yes.
Just a comment, and my name is Edith Macker with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, and I just want to thank the IEPA for being very responsive. MPC did terrific work in listening to the communities throughout the region and understanding what the issues were, and I know we have a long way to go, and I know it's not a perfect process, but just want to acknowledge how appreciative we are that you're responsive to that. So. And then just a general a question too, Director Bonnet, you talked about kind of interest in ratepayers and lowering that. Can you also talk about the sustainability of projects that the IEPA is investing in?
Yes. The sustainability concept is really on the horizons of a lot of communities as well as the agency. And as we look at, sort of, again, looking at things differently, what is not a waste, what is not can be a product, what can be a longer life cycle of something. I talk about the water conservation, where you have good distribution systems, you have good leak detection, all of that makes for a sustainable community. When you look at ways, broader than just maybe water quality, but, you look at composting opportunities and organic waste opportunities and, just ways that communities can really be sustainable and take control of either their water quality or their waste, I think is important. And so as we look at water conservation, as we look at green infrastructure, and we help communities figure out a way to take what was a traditional sort of waste stream and look at a product or to remove it. I mean, we talk about stormwater runoff. We remove those pollutants from our treatment systems. And so our treatment systems have a better useful life, you have lower rates. I mean, there's just all kinds of sort of a sustainable, pattern to all of that. So we're trying to encourage that. As I said, we opened the legislation. It's all absolutely eligible through financing. And so we really are encouraging that as well.
Great. So I have a really quick question. We kicked it off with kind of talking about what I consider the elephant in the room, which is the revenue source on the back end, rates, right? And George, I was wondering if you could maybe think about what tips you might have for smaller communities in our region that are grappling with the water rate conversation for how they might be able to get out in front and have some quality conversations with their communities?
Sure. And that's where I actually started my presentation. What my most important recommendation would be is not to have the first few times that your customers hear from you is about the rate increase. And that was, like I said, someone thought I worked for the Department of Corrections. They didn't know what our truck, we have white trucks. Now people are calling us saying, we see your trucks all over the city. Our trucks were always all over the city. People just didn't know it was us. What I believe what any community, small or large, has to make before they start getting into the cost equation is the value equation. What is it that we're providing to you? I'd heard with great seriousness a report, it was determined that people don't want to pay more for water. And I was at some program I was in, and I say, duh, I don't want to pay more for anything. Coffee, chairs, clothes, unless you give me a reason to pay more for it. And if the reason makes sense to me, I will pay. But the reason's got to come first. So we spend a tremendous amount of time explaining to our customers what we're doing, why we're doing it, why it matters to them, that this is about the water you use in your house. The power goes out, it's a problem. But the minute you're told it doesn't flush or there isn't water in the sink, it is a crisis instantaneously. And taking those challenges and turning them into, that's the value of what we deliver to you. It's literally life-giving. Here's what the systems are. We take reporters down to show them the pipes. Yes, a smaller community is smaller, but that means the local reporter's probably right down the street. Invite them out, take them down. It's fascinating stuff once people get it. We found people are very interested. And what it takes for them to have clean water, you're not taking money from them for anything other than something that they want. If they know why they want it and what's needed to get it, then you make the rate, then you have the rate conversation. So the ability to get out and talk to the folks first. I have to say one of the greatest parts of our industry is that we've been proud of how well we do it and how people take it for granted. We're so good at what we do, people don't think that when they turn on the spigot, the water's there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at the ready. And when it goes down the drain, it gets cleaned. And it's all like magic. And you go anywhere else most anywhere else in the world, and providing water that day and cleaning it after you've used it is one of the most important and difficult things that anybody does, particularly women. And when it's not there and you boil it, and the number of people that die from waterborne illnesses, it's an absolute calamity. And we're so good at what we do, and that's sort of a badge of courage and a badge of honor. And my reaction is true. But that doesn't help us if we go back to that ratepayer and say, by the way, you got to spend $10 more a month. Their reaction will be, why? I've always paid the same. What happened? If they don't know why you're doing it and why it matters to them, you'll lose. So the first step, and you should lose, not just in water, on anything. I hope anybody who raises prices without telling someone why first loses. And we've got to get out and talk to our customers. They love the product. It's easy to communicate. People become interested naturally. And so it doesn't have to be expensive. It's stuff that's there, and it can be done in any size community. From there, you enter the conversation of what you need the revenue for.
Great. That's wonderful. So who wants to bring us home? We have time for one more question. All right.
Got to get in one question for each speaker.
Can you
Jordan,
introduce yourself again?
Oh, sorry. Kristen Ray, Evanston Water Utility. I know there was an attempt to repeal the ban on tax-exempt financing on WIFIA projects in a transportation bill earlier this year. It did not go through. So I was wondering, what are the prospects better this time around with these two transportation bills that are coming up next month? And what are the perceived barriers to that? Are the interest groups out there purporting to make WIFIA out to be something that's going to take away from SRF? Is that part of the issue, or what are the other problems in getting that through Congress?
As far as I know, it's the same bills we're talking about. So they, and I may be wrong, did they pass both this House and the Senate, but they're different bills, so they had to go to conference. They didn't go to conference. One of them wants to amend the other bill, and they're all hung up over it. And it's being used now as one of the sort of leverage points to, get, certain, I can't.
Wheeling and dealing.
I'm running out of words. It's similar to, how they're using the debt limit and the appropriations bills. It's being held hostage. It's important. It has to be passed, or at least renewed for another 3 months or something, or else all construction on a lot of highway projects will end in November or December. So there's a lot of need to get this bill passed. As they're doing with appropriations bills, they keep kicking the can down the road. So it needs to pass. It should pass. Who knows what's going to happen? they need a new Speaker of the House. That hasn't even been resolved yet. So a lot's going to go on in the next few months. I don't think it has anything to do with some of the industry groups or some of the stakeholders who are afraid that WIFIA will take away from the SRF program or take money away. There are very strong interest groups pushing to get rid of this prohibition, at the same time supporting the SRF program. So I don't think that that's the issue at all.
Great, thank you. Do any of you have questions, either for each other or for the audience? We're good to go? All right. I would like to thank you all for your dialogue today. Before you go, we want to send you off in style. I'd like to introduce our president of the Metropolitan Planning Council, Mary Sue Barrett.
Thanks. Thank you, Danielle. You did a terrific job. Danielle did a terrific job moderating today and recruiting an awesome panel. So I know we learned a lot, and the full room is testimony to the fact that there is a community of actors who want to make good things happen. We heard a lot of challenges today. Personally, I was interested in the fact that aggregation of demand to access creative projects and financing was mentioned by each of our three panelists in different ways. That's something the Metropolitan Planning Council takes to heart, and we would like to be a supporting actor there in helping identify and assisting some communities who want to be the trailblazers for that in this region. And it sounds like there's some federal partners who want to help us figure that out. So I'm excited about that. Lots of good takeaways. I do think, Director Bonnet, that you set the tone for what's possible here. We have some resources, we have the right talent, we're building innovation into our system and streamlining it at the same time. So that's really a great place to be. And we've got folks in Washington. We are really excited about what Jordan shared with us today. We've also had contact with Jim Gebhardt with the Finance Center. They're looking to Chicago. We have traditionally been, this region, an innovator, a laboratory for innovation. And so, George, you inspire us, but we want to be competitive and make sure that we have a story that's equally compelling in the future. So lots to build on, lots of takeaways. We'll be doing a write-up of this. Be sure to send this to you. We also, as you see, are recording this both for live broadcasting on YouTube, and then we also host that later. So if there's someone that you know that really wants to hear this conversation, you'll get the link to that to share. This event was possible thanks to a couple of our sponsors. Over here on the other side of the room is Chris Burke Engineering, and Chris King with Robinson Engineering. They're not only our sponsors today, but both of these gentlemen are board members of MPC, and I am so fortunate to be part of an organization that gets to work with really interesting people who are very generous with their time and ideas as well as support. So thank you. If you liked what you saw today, please take this back. This is a list of some of our other fall events, and I will point out a couple. There's a series of ADA, Americans with Disabilities, 25th anniversary events, and we're hosting one on October 27th. It's really about the idea of universal design and how some of our public places are falling short. So we've got a great panel for that. That's another noontime panel on the 27th. At the top of the sheet, you'll see a November 2nd date. That is an actually morning-long forum. MPC and DuPage County Board Chairman Dan Cronin have teamed up together on this huge issue. It's kind of an overlay of what we talked about today of streamlining our many, many, many units of local government. We've got 7,000 of them in Illinois, more than any other place in the country. So the answer is not one thing. Sometimes consolidation, sometimes joint procurement, sometimes service sharing, lots of different strategies, and there's actually some good innovation that's happening. So we're going to be profiling some of that, giving out some awards, inspiring others, and to connect the dots on these issues, we do hope that when we next give out an award, it might be to a group of water utilities that are collaborating in our region. The recommendations that we worked closely with IEPA on, and that you've heard Director Bonnet talk about that they are implementing, that's what this sheet of paper on your chairs is about. So please take a look. Again, the fact that you heard such a strong message of constant innovation and reinvention today means that these recommendations are not the end point. We're going to keep on gathering ideas and working with our governmental partners to continue to innovate. So thank you for being such a terrific partner to the whole IEPA team. One more partnership that we have that I want to call your attention to. As you depart, you'll see a place where you can sign a petition for the independent map amendment. This is about taking redistricting in Illinois out of the political process. We are one of hundreds of organizations that is part of this, and they need to collect hundreds of thousands of signatures. So if that's something that you can support, add your name. Thank you again to our speakers. Both George and Jordan traveled from out of state, and Lisa made a big effort to be here as well today. So together, I think they delivered an excellent panel, and I'm grateful to them and to all of you. Good afternoon.